surrounded his men, he realizes that ultimately he is the one responsible for their fates. But another general is swept up here as well during the attack. Frank mentioned earlier George Maryland Stuart. Stuart is also captured quickly in these works. He is swept up so early that he is a little bit surprised. He finds someone who is demanding his surrender and says, it's Colonel Beaver, by the way, the 148th Pennsylvania, and he says, I would like to surrender to an officer of rank. I am General Stuart. Beaver answers, what, are you Jeb Stuart? Thinking he'd really caught a prize. I don't imagine that George Stuart was quite as amused. He said, no, I am George H. Stuart. Beaver said, I will accept your surrender. Where is your sword, sir? Stuart said, well, sir, in a melancholy tone of regret with a tinge of the comic, you all waked us up so early this morning that I didn't have time to get it on. And so Stuart is taken to the rear as well. Hancock in turn offers his hand to Stuart when he arrived at headquarters. But Stuart said, under existing circumstances, sir, I cannot take your hand. Hancock snaps back. Under any other circumstances, sir, it would not have been offered. You can imagine that Stuart's experience as a prisoner was not quite as good as Allegheny Johnson's experience as a prisoner. But Stuart, despite his lack of gentlemanly bearing in that moment, shows his class later on. When he's looking back at his men, again, remember this bond between officers and men. He looks around at his men that have been captured and says, men, keep up your spirits. You will hear all sorts of reports, but do not believe them or be discouraged by anything. Remember always that you are Confederate soldiers. So again, we see this bond between officers and men. We also see an interesting contrast in character between Johnson and Stuart, how they each cope with adversity, with the situation of being captured. Stuart is so enraged at being captured that he is so strongly devoted to remaining enemies with the men who have captured him. He is quite bitter. Johnson, however, accepts the reality, to some degree, of being captured and takes it with a large dose of humility. Now also in this area, about to be captured, is artillery. Remember how Frank described the foot race between the artillery and the Union Second Corps. I can tell you that although they're going to arrive at similar times, I would say the Second Corps wins the foot race because most of those guns are going to be rushed right back here only to be captured. Some guns had remained in the salient. Carrington's battery of 4 Napoleons was in place when the attack hit. Allegheny Johnson had admonished Carrington to remain vigilant, to expect an attack. And Carrington's battery had been able to fire 25 to 30 rounds before they were captured. But in the end, most of the artillery, as well as Carrington's battery, is going to be swept up in the attack and captured. 20 guns total are going to be captured here in the salient. Along with those cannon and those generals and those men, you also have several flags being captured. Robert Robertson of the 93rd New York wrote, once the rebel colors floated out with the wind until it could be grasped by one of our boys. The brave color bearer rose to his feet, clinging to the staff. Our brave boy also rises, clinging to the flag, and with disengaged hands they seek to grasp each other's throats in a deadly struggle for the flag. Thus they stand over the very rampart, both determined to win the flag. By common consent, firing